I still remember the days of the Korean War and the days before that. I was only a young lad as the world powers pushed us around after the Second World War. It all started with the end of the Japanese colonization of Korea. Yes, I too remember that very well. In 1945, the 35 years of Japanese colonial rule of our land was finally over. I was only a young student back then. I remember the Japanese mistreating us and forcing us to speak Japanese even at home. I was glad when they finally left. It was about time too. I recall that we were separated into North and South on the 38th parallel. I remember the Americans coming to protect us in the South. They taught us how to play baseball, introduced cheese, spam, and sausages to our daily diets. We had 5 years of relative freedom between 1945 to 1950. When the Soviets finally arrived to rid of the remaining Japanese colonialists, we rejoiced and gladly welcomed them. Although they didn't introduce any delicious foods to our people, they introduced justice in its best form. Communism saved our lives from the evil landowners who would charge 3 times the right amount just so they could starve us. We received many military equipments from the Soviets so we could have a strong army to protect our pure form of justice. Well, if you say so. But democracy was the right way. Democracy allowed the whole population to choose a ruler. Your ruler was selfish after the Soviets and Americans left. For their own greed, your government attacked us without warning. You mustn't talk about Kim Il-sung in such a rude manner. Our people were weeping for families and our families in the South. It was all Kim Il-sung could do to launch a campaign to unify our country, so that you too could receive true freedom and justice, which was introduced to us by the Soviets. We also wanted to save you from the brainwashing of the U.S. and the dictator Syngman Rhee. For you, it may have been for a happy cause, but for me as a South Korean, it was terrifying. In the early hours of June 25th of 1950, we could hear artillery fire in the distance, and we saw smoke rising in the north. By noon, news had reached us that the North was launching a full-scale invasion. We were advised to flee. By June 28th, Seoul was captured, and we had fled down south to Daejeon, thanks to a kind farmer and his truck. We had you completely surrounded in Busan by August 4th. It was a long battle from then on. If it were not for the United Nations, we would have unified Korea by then. Aye, it was a long standoff at the Busan perimeter, which lasted for more than a month. On September 14th, the great General MacArthur of the United States led the X-Corps on the invasion of Incheon, which seriously crippled the North's forces. I will admit we had not anticipated the act, and from then on we started to retreat back north. I was a proud fighter as we pushed your troops back up north to the Chinese border. Unfortunately, we were pushed down to Seoul after the Chinese interfered. In the end, we ended with an armistice on May 25th of 1953. The armistice meant a ceasefire, and it is still in place today. Technically, we are still at war with each other, and we could still win. I believe we would win, but if it were not for Kim Il-sung's selfishness, we would not have needed to suffer the war in the first place. No, you got it all wrong. The conflict was because of America. They threatened our freedom and prevented the South from becoming a communist nation. Actually, the conflict was a result of the Cold War, a tense battle of ideals and weaponry, especially nuclear arms, between the United Soviet Socialist Republic and the United States of America. The United Socialist Soviet Republic supported communism while the U.S. supported democracy. The war was directly caused by the selfish agendas of the North and South, but those agendas were there in the first place because of influence from the USSR in North Korea and USA in South Korea. I see what you mean. I still think that it was partially because of Kim Il-sung's selfish desires for power, and maybe even because of Syngman Rhee's want for power. But you are right, the war does make more sense when it is portrayed as a conflict of the Cold War, and to a large extent. Otherwise, America would probably not have interfered. That is right. We decided to aid South Korea not only to defend it, but to show the Soviets that we were willing to fight for our democracy, and we feared if we did not stop them in Korea, they would spread to other countries in Asia. I hope we don't have another Cold War again. It would be nice to see Korea reunited again, though. Well, we will have to wait and see. The Korean War did not have a clear victor, but it clearly reflected the battle in ideologies between the two superpowers of the US and USSR during the intense Cold War. The ideologies still battle on to this very day.